Here in the garden of Tropical Nomad here in Bali, Indonesia. Now, if you haven't watched this before, maybe you're tuning in for the first time, SpeakuP Monday is an open format, deep dive Q&A, which the purpose of it is really to kind of to unlock inspiration, maybe some motivation, right, for other people who if we're lucky, right? We're always lucky here. And so this is our 132.
Wow.
So we've been going for just almost 2.5 years. And if tonight you're involved in education, now whether that's online education or offline education, tonight is a night where you're going to want to pay attention, because what we're talking about now is the future of learning. The future of learning. So if you're either a teacher or you're a person who makes online courses, whether that's an entrepreneur or whether that's in the teaching, educational industry, literally from education to entrepreneurship, tonight is a night that you really want to be here and pay attention, because it's powerful. And one thing which I didn't really even think about mentioning was, to me, Bianca, and I'll introduce Bianca Raby in a second, she's part of this movement of very powerful women who, we all know, guys, right? If our world had more female leadership, we would be in a slightly different place than we are now. Let's just be honest, right? Thank you. We've got a few applause here in the audience, right? And the way I see you is that you're part of this. And I did a post recently about, about female empowerment, and I meant every word that I said. And I see you as being such a powerful leader within that field, and it's essential just to balance up and to redirect where necessary where we're going. So to introduce Bianca Raby, we've only met maybe a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
And 15 years as an educator, and then realized that in Australia that the network there, let's call it the old boys club, I'm just going to put it out there, was never going to allow it to flourish. And the ideas that she had, the passion that she has about education is palpable, and she was not given that chance to express that. So then set up her own company called Opida, which in 2 years has gone from 8 staff to 30 staff. So 8 to 30, which is phenomenal, right? And what this is really about is about the learning designer. Now, this is, I'm not sure if you're aware, but 3%, this stat was amazing when you told me. It's 3% of all.
Yeah, 3 to 5% of all online courses that are self-paced are not finished.
Yeah, I mean.
Sorry. The 3 to 5% are only the ones that finish. So.
Yeah, so there's a 3 to 5% completion rate, which is crazy, right? So a learning designer is able to, take the aspects of what is this about? What's the purpose of this? And able to create and structure in such a way that we actually understand.
Yes,
right? We actually learn.
Yeah.
There you go. We actually learn, right?
Yes.
As opposed to this rote style learning of I'm the teacher, you listen to what I'm saying, and then it's memory recall. That's what it's testing. Factual memory recall. We vomit it out on a piece of paper for our exam. We get a mark that says we've passed, and then we forget everything because we never learnt it in the first place.
We never learnt it.
So look, I'm really looking forward to getting beneath the bonnet a little bit more.
Yeah.
My name's Robert Ian Bonnick. I'm a speaker, a coach, an advisor. So what I love to do is to help entrepreneurs, leaders, coaches turn their story into impact and income, right? By empathetically connecting with their target audience, right? That's what I love to do. Yep. So, Bianca Raby, welcome to the show, my darling.
Thank you. What an introduction.
Yeah, probably the longest intro I think I've ever done. But we just go with the energy here.
But you were practicing on Thursday night. I mean, you were introducing me like you'd known me for years, and I was like, who is this guy? He really understood what I did when I explained what I did, and that is very rare. So, thank you for that.
So we were at an event here in Bali Bali on Thursday night. Julian Uhlig, if you're watching this, incredible guy. And I was, because I'm looking forward to doing some work with Bianca pretty soon.
Yeah.
And I think the world of her, right? So I was introducing her
It's like
with
a celebrity.
I know, right? With motivation and glee and joy and inspiration, because you inspire me. So then I was introducing her to a bunch of different people. One of which is Arthur Kamazi, who will be interviewing on Wednesday, which is another phenomenal impact human being. And yeah, so I'm pretty taken by it. But look, with education, so now you spent 15 years as an educator. So now, can you maybe sum up for us, how that experience was for you?
Yeah. So, 15 years around about in the sector. So I was an institutionalized educator, as most are, which means I went to school and I finished school and I went to school to study how to be back at school. Then I went back into school to teach the kids to go to uni, to go to do more school. So by the time I got to 28, I had only been in a school system. I had done various roles inside that school system, so it had a bit of variety. But I was just craving something new. I knew that I didn't really know how the rest of the world worked. I had completely understood the school system, and I knew something was up and I didn't like it and I wasn't comfortable and I was all those things and I wasn't in alignment and I felt off all the time. I was second guessing my decisions all the time and trying different roles and not finding my place. And so I cracked it and decided to go do my MBA and basically took myself out of the school system, resigned. I was living in a remote community in northern Australia, if anybody Australians watching. It's Gapawiak. It was 850 kilometres from Darwin by four-wheel drive through mud and dirt and literally rivers, right? And 2 hours from a shop, from Woolworths. Any Australians out there? Woolies was 2 hours away. And I was sitting in this community and I was desperately unhappy with all of my life choices at the time. And so I thought, fuck it, I'll just go and do something completely different. I already dropped the F-bomb, sorry. I thought I was going to wait a little bit.
You can drop whichever bomb you want, darling.
So I was like,
Apart from
right.
that bomb.
So I went, okay, I would really like to study business. I know there's something in me that wants to understand business, is entrepreneurial, has always been trying to do things differently, has always seen things differently to most of my peers, and something is itching. So I went, I'll go to Melbourne, of course, the most polar opposite place you could ever go to where I was sitting, and I'll pick the most prestigious business school because nobody respects a teacher out in the business world because they think you're just a teacher, generally, and I'll just go and get the best degree I can, and then nobody can say no to me in a job interview. That was my rationale. Didn't do lots of research, just picked that one and typed in and put my application in, and again thought I could just get in like my undergrad. Didn't realise it was an application process. Got the call up, you've got an interview. I said, an interview for what? And they said to come into the MBA. I said, oh, I have to interview for this? Shit, really? Okay, sure, yeah, let's do that. I'm free now. And so we did the interview and they accepted me, and 3 or 4 years later I was a graduate. Actually, I think it took 4.5 years with all life drama in between, and learnt a whole new game, learned how the rest of the world worked, some of the rest of the world, and really opened my eyes and gave me a new crew of people, a new way of thinking, a new way of looking at the world. I got all that core economical knowledge, and I just got all of that. I was soaking it up, and then knew I was going to work in ed tech startups. I had to, I had to be back in the system. I was never going to be able to leave education. I tried a couple of times thinking I'd go for jobs that are just like nothing to do with education, but it always drew me back in. Then I worked across a couple of startups and was, playing around with my own ideas, worked in some consulting, all of that kind of jazz, and just kept finding myself back at, this is how people learn, this is how we need to teach, or this is how we need to design to teach, and ended up in those roles, and just was really, by the time I sort of left to go off on my own, I was just so read up about what we needed to do in the online space to be able to cater for the generation now, not the next generation, the one now. This is not next and it's not the future, this is now, that are chained to their devices, and their devices are part of them and part of their life. And so how does technology enable instead of hinder our learning? And what are we going to do as a sector to integrate those two things? Because it's not been done typically too well.
I love that, ed tech. I mean, I learn new stuff all the time. Ed tech. I remember ed tech, education technology. Ed tech.
It's all the lingo. You'll have so much lingo by the end of the day.
I know. I'm like lingoing up.
Yeah.
So look, what this show is a bit about, right? SpeakuP Monday. It's about delving a little bit deeper into what drives us, right?
Yeah.
Because we're all driven by similar things. We want to be fulfilled in what we're doing. We want to be understood. We want to be loved for who we are.
Yeah.
Now, so what's coming up for me is that this part of you, this part of Bianca, who went through the system as best she could.
Yeah.
And then she realized that, hey, there's a better way to do this.
Yeah.
And it's so obvious to me, but it's not being done.
Yep.
Now, when did you feel that you were banging your head up against a wall or a glass ceiling?
First day I stepped foot in a classroom. Yeah. I nearly pulled out of my degree because I think it was maybe 10 months in, I was just going to uni and I was like, what is this? This is a crock of shit. Like, I'm not learning anything. I felt really like it just felt really out of touch with what was going on. I felt really confused at why I was spending all this money and time to be doing what I was doing at the particular, and mine was one of the better courses. I had to say that it was one of the better ones in Australia at the time around, practical teaching courses. It was a 4-year undergrad degree, no fast track, no kind of easy way now. And then I got out into the classroom and I mean, I exaggerate on the first day, probably not the first day, I was still very excited to be a teacher. But I think about a couple of months in, I was like, wow, this is next level. This is an entire consuming lifestyle of a career. This is not something that you can put down at the end of the day. This is completely, this whole system is all consuming. And how do I show up for these 29 beautiful little children that are staring up at me every morning, with the piles and piles and piles and piles and piles of responsibility that is being laid down onto teachers, on the side. These kids should be the most important thing right now, and they're not. It's all the other things that get piled on, and all the responsibility and all the regulation and the documents and the this and the... It's an absolute insane workload for a K-12 teacher, I have to say. Like, it is, everyone criticizes because of the holidays, but, when you're in it, you don't have a life. It is an all-consuming. You don't go to the toilet when you want. You don't eat when you want. You are chained to a bell. You are chained to 28 children. You are making. They say, I think there's some statistic like you make 800 decisions in a day in a classroom as a teacher. 800 small decisions because you think you've got 28 children at you for 6 hours if you're a primary school teacher. And they all need something from you at any given time. So you get to 3:15 when the bell goes, and I guess the corporate world are like, 3:15, that's not the end of the day. But you have literally cared for 28 to 32 little children for 6 hours who have asked you 5 million questions, right? So you are just completely spent as a human. And I just was like, hang on a minute, something's up here. And then various other things that were up with the whole thing. And I tried various different roles to see if I could find a place that fit me more, because I loved the creative part of the teaching. I loved getting in there and thinking about how can I get these little darlings to understand something that I want, that they should, or how can I get them to better their life. And going back to what drives me, it's all just about empowerment and, giving people an opportunity to see things differently and have that experience. So yeah, it was very, very early on where I started to think, hang on a minute, this isn't for me. But I also knew that I was fairly young and I needed to get my runs on the board. So I did a bunch of things to try and get myself that experience, and I got thrown into the roughest schools, in the roughest situations, which were all so good at accelerating my learning curve.
Wow.
So...
yeah. And look, guys, if we can turn up Bianca's microphone a little bit more, that'll be great. Mm-hmm. So I get now, right, that this is Australia. So where were you born in Australia?
I was born in Adelaide.
Adelaide. So, yeah. And just quickly, so privileged life, underprivileged life, what was happening there?
Yeah, probably lower middle class. I had all my basic needs met, beautiful family, loving parents, all of that. There was no basic needs missing, all people, we have our family stuff, and we. Sorry. No, totally not. It was a very calm childhood, to be honest. And I think they normally say that people like me now, like if someone met me now, they think, oh, you must have been a rebel against the system back then. But I wasn't. I was literally, I had this mutable type personality. I'm a mutable sign. So I was very good at adapting. I'm very chameleon-like. I can just kind of move into a situation and adapt myself. And so I think what happened was this is school. Okay, this is what you do. You go to school and you do this and you do that. And I really didn't have any protests about it. I mean, I think there was a lot of times throughout my childhood, there was a core part of me that thought some of it was wrong. And didn't quite fit right, but generally I suited the system. I had the personality that suited the system, so the system didn't do anything to me like that, right? But it wasn't until I was in the system and I was watching what I was unconsciously and not meaning to be doing for these kids, and I realized where this was wrong. It was fine for kids like me who adapted and just got along with it, but it was hell for anyone else that went outside the box and who didn't have that mutable personality.
And that actually is where life gave you, right? In the middle of Northern Territory.
Yeah,
right?
Then I go thrown out to the bush.
Yeah.
And I basically put myself in a situation where I was always uncomfortable, right? I mean, you talk about, I taught in London for a year as well, and I tell so many silly stories about that time, but I wish I'd written it all down. I would have had a really good book. But over the year in London, I taught in 55 schools. Ooh. 55 London primary schools. Now, if anyone's ever taught in a London primary school, wow. Like, by the end of the year, I was so beaten from an educator's perspective. Not as a human, I was completely fine, but as an educator, that I would walk in and I would know in the first 5 minutes, the first 3 people I interacted with at the school, of what my day was going to be like. I was reading the energy of what was going on in that school. I witnessed so much violence in primary schools. I witnessed countless crazy shit with kids that just really, and you just, when you're a relief teacher, when you're a supply teacher, when they use the word in the UK, you just have to turn up and survive. And you have to make sure the kids survive. So your job is just to protect them from each other and you from them, right? Because you're not there to teach anything. I mean, good luck, right? So that was pretty soul destroying from an educator's perspective, and it took me a year to go back in the classroom. I was almost traumatized from it. And I still have some trauma from my primary school teaching days, and I'm not kidding you. There's a physical reaction that comes up when I hear and when I walk into a school in Australia, or in that kind of situation, because it is a really tough job. So.
Wow, thank you for. Because I think a lot of us now, who maybe didn't have an idea before about, what a teacher faces, I think we have a much better idea, of that, because I don't think you can really know how much you face until you do it, right? Yeah. From what it sounds like. I mean, obviously we've all been in school, and but I didn't really think of it in that way before, about the 29 kids.
Just I used to think, how can these beautiful little 8-year-olds make me so angry? Like, there was rage in me that I had never felt before. I mean, I'm a very calm person generally, right? I mean, I'm a firecracker too, if someone, depending on the soapbox I'm on, but at the same time, generally throughout life, I'm very calm. But you can get worn down. I mean, even the calmest of people can get worn down by that amount of constant neediness and attention, and the way that the whole system's set up. It's set up for a disaster for everybody, basically. There's no peace in that. Yeah, and I used to think that I can't do this job if these 8-year-olds can get me this angry. Like, that's not okay. Yeah.
One thing that you said that I'm going to pick up on, right?
Sure.
Firecracker. Right. I'm pretty sure the guys heard it here. Firecracker. So we can see that there's a girl, gorgeous girl, was born, had all the things, wasn't wanting for anything, right? And then, is a chameleon, and is in Australia, is in Adelaide, and then kind of begins to see, hey, I'm a chameleon, and starts to test herself.
Yeah.
And put herself in situations which most people would say, like, you don't need to do this, right? You don't. You've got all the things you need. You look the right part. You What are you doing?
Assimilate, fine.
Right.
Yeah.
But you're like you're like, no, let's get into it, right? Let's get into it.
Pretty much.
So you're getting into it, right? So this firecracker, now, so rolling forward a good couple of years. So now you're realizing that the system doesn't work and is not working, and then you realize, well, I've got to do something about it.
Yeah. There was always a sense of like, I always had a sense that because I was so blessed with a lot of my basic needs and I had a really good foundation and there was nothing particularly hindering me. And I've dealt with the guilt on this, so it might sound like I feel guilty, but I don't anymore because I've dealt with that. But I did have a sense always in my life that there was something I was going to do to support and help and be part of the solution. I wasn't going to be part of the problem. And so every time I was part of the problem, that's why I had the trauma and that's why I had the sinking gut, awful, wrenching feeling. I'm part of the problem. Every time I got mad at an 8-year-old, I realized I was part of the problem. The 8-year-old didn't do anything wrong. I was in a system whereby if I played, I would be part of the problem. So I had to kick it out and not play anymore. And that's what I still struggle with, is how do you play in a system and not take that responsibility on for being part of the problem? Because at the moment, there are still clients that we serve that are not always doing the best for their students. They're doing what they can, but there's a question of like, is this really the right thing to be doing? But it's not our place to do that in our current arrangement and our current company structure. But I just hope that through working with us, they get a glimpse of how it could be done. So
let's move on to that. So now your company is called Opida.
Yes.
Right. So Oppida, right?
Yeah.
Opida. And so tell us, what does it do, and why did it come into being?
Well, I was doing a bit of soul searching after deciding to leave a position at another company. That I was doing some similar work to what Opida does now, but not entirely the same. And I was doing some soul searching, and I was thinking about, well, what is it that I like doing? Because, when you start your own business, you've got to like what you do. Otherwise, what's the point? So I was like, well, what do I like doing? What's my ideal day? I probably read a couple of self-help books, and I had, some deep journaling. I was like, what do I like doing? And I really enjoyed and I missed the creative part of designing learning. And I really love technology when it's working, not Mercury retrograde. And I love the idea of using those tools and creating. So when smartboards were invented, I don't know if anyone's seen a smartboard before, they were the best thing since sliced bread for me as a teacher. These were the interactive whiteboards. And, I just lost my mind when they came in and my whole teaching changed and the technology became part of every lesson. And I was excited by all the engagement I was getting from the kids from that. So I'd always loved the creative process of creating the learning. So when I left my job and I thought, I think it's time to do something on my own, I just said, learning design is where it's at because we're missing this step. In the online space, online is not new, even though it feels new for lots of people in the world right now. It's not new. We've been doing it for a long time. We've been doing distance ed for a long time, distance education, especially in places like Australia where there's a lot of remote and a lot of distance to cover. So distance ed's been around forever. Online learning has been around at least 20 years. But the problem is that it's been the poor cousin, right? It's the thing you do if you have to. It's the thing that gets the least amount of resources. It's the thing that isn't. It's kind of just been there on the side, right? And then last year it became the favourite auntie, and we finally got a chance to shine as online people. But what I was back to why I started Opida was because I was seeing so much of, especially in higher education. So once I did my MBA, I ended up in higher ed. So I came out of K-12 into the MBA, dabbled in a whole bunch of stuff, worked in mental health for a little while in there as well, and then landed in higher education and saw a big gap of the designer. So that taking the subject matter expert, the academic in instances in a university, taking their brilliant knowledge and turning it into something that can actually be learnt from. And there seemed to be a big missing step. It seemed to be that the academic was asked to do that bit. And I'm like, why would they do that bit? They're not a teacher. They're not trained in education. They don't understand pedagogy. They don't understand how people learn. They understand, the particular area of engineering that they're really good at, obviously, because that's why they're an academic in that. But they haven't been trained, right? And there's a big gap there. So in Australia especially, only K to 12 teachers are trained in education. Anyone in higher education can do short courses, certificates, learn on the job. So any lecturer at a university is not generally got an education degree, right? So there's this entire assumption that because you know stuff, you can teach stuff. And I was like, no, that's not how it works. Just because you know stuff doesn't mean you have the communication skills or the understanding of how to actually get that out to a way in which a learner can learn from it and not just be bored out of their damn brain. So that was a huge gap in the higher education. I kept going, so who's the teacher here? Who wrote this curriculum? Who did that? I don't understand. Who designed that? Who wrote this subject outline? Where's the learning outcomes? And I was asking all these questions really innocently, to be honest, at the beginning. I was like, where are the people that know how to educate? And no one was answering me. And I was like, oh, they're not here. And I was like, shit, we've got a lot of work to do. Because I was seeing the stuff that was coming out and being called a quality online course, and I'm like, that looks like shit. I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to learn like that. I mean, you wouldn't even get me in that damn thing, right? So I started to say, hey, I think that there's a whole thing here. And then of course I was doing a bit of research and realizing that there was all these terms out there like instructional designer and learning designer, and I'm like, well, I'm not an instructional designer, because instruction says that I'm going to tell you something and you're going to absorb it, and I'm not that. I'm a learner. I teach, right? So I was like, no, it's not instructional design. I'm pretty sure I don't want to label myself like that. So then I started picking up the term learning design. And of course, I'm not the first, I didn't come up with it. I'm not ever saying that. But I started to pick it up from the industry and was like, right, this is the step that's missing. And then I realized the other step that was missing was, shit, now that we're doing online courses, these are products. These are not one-off experiences. So the way that traditional academia works is that said lecturer, so said academic, Rob, the academic of life, goes in and, he has a curriculum that's signed off by a board, right? And they say, yes, Rob, you can teach all those things you said you want to teach. Great. Here's some learning outcomes, bam. And then you might not ever report to anybody for 2 years on what you've actually taught, possibly. Wow. You could literally just take that outline, go into your room, make some PowerPoint slides, put a bunch of cat memes on there, turn up every day to class and teach whatever you goddamn want. Now, I'm exaggerating because it isn't that bad, but there isn't a lot of accountability between what we said we were going to do, what you do in the face-to-face room. Now, the difference with online is that you have to make that fixed. So you, as Rob, have to come to learning designer Bianca and say, well, in week 1 of my course, this is what I do. And you have to tell me what you do. And you have to tell me what you teach, what framework you teach, how you teach that. How do you assess it? How do you check learning? How do you get feedback? Now, that's a very, very, very different mindset to winging it or with a PowerPoint deck you've had for 5 years on your computer, right? Which is what a lot of academics have been doing, which in lots of ways, some of the really good ones get away with it. They teach beautiful classes and it's amazing. No judgment, just fact. So we had to, as a sector, we have to change the way that we look at what we're creating. We're now creating experiences, and online learning is an experience because there is so is a face-to-face, to be honest, but you are really mapping out, you're trying to get that learner through a journey with you, and you can't see them, right? So it's a product, and it has some fixed elements and have some variable elements to it. And so what the sector was, I think, really missing was that when we try and create an experience online, we have to think of it with a product mindset, which then applies a whole new set of skills, which is of that product management. So if we don't have good project management, if we don't understand what the end goal is, and we don't understand all the parts, then how do we get it there on time, on budget, and out to students without any errors in it? So there was 2 massive things that were just not being done. And so back to your early question, it's a long answer. I was like, right, what do I like doing? I like doing that. What am I kind of good at? Yeah, that. All right, well, let's just why don't I just put out a brand that says we focus on the learning design and just talk about learning all the time and just, see what happens. And here we are, 2 years on. So
2 years?
2 years.
And 30 staff all over the world.
They're not all full-time, so I'll just put a caveat. When she says 30 staff, makes me feel like we're at a really big company. We have about 6 or 7 full-time staff and about 30 on the books as contractors and doing all sorts of different things and projects. So I'll just caveat that. But yes, all over the world. So lots of people in the Opida family, which is lovely.
Which I love. And I mean, by the way, guys, so if you've got any questions, we'll have some questions soon. We've got a third microphone over here somewhere. And in the next 10 minutes, put up a hand and ask your question. Remember to point at your mouth. I know that sounds so obvious. Every week I say this, but every week someone doesn't
like that.
and doesn't understand why you can't hear. So it's not for you, it's for somebody else, right? So, all right, so now the bit which comes up for me now is that, so you've realized all of this. Now you've actually taken a step that 90% of people do not take, which is a step. Right?
Yeah, I guess.
So you make a step, you move out.
Mad.
Now, right?
Yeah.
And you're crazy, okay? In a good way.
Yeah.
So now, like, what kind of resistance did you come up against, and how did you, or how are you dealing with it now?
Yeah, I think anyone who started their own business, I mean, you're battling with yourself mostly. You can pretend it's the outside world, but it's really you. So the resistance comes from within. So there was a lot of personal hurdles that I had to get over. And the first one to make the step was to stop waiting for someone to give me permission. For some reason, I had conjured up some subconscious stuff around, I had to have a certain amount of things to have been given permission to be able to play here and blah, blah, blah. And maybe I haven't got enough experience. Maybe they won't trust me. There was all that underlying kind of self-doubt, imposter syndrome stuff that was playing in.
You know what just popped in? That to me, and I could be wrong, and I don't mind about that, right, wrong, whatever, is the hub of what female empowerment is all about. Because,
it's very much about imposter. We do have, it's very typical amount of female entrepreneurs, I think, from what I can gather, is this feeling of like waiting for someone to give, that permission. And then, and you can tell if you're one of those, because when you see people doing what they love and you're admiring them, if your thought is, how the fuck can they do that and I can't do that? If that's your thought, then you're in that imposter syndrome space, right? And I had that thought all the time, like, why has that dude got all that money and all that fame? And look, he doesn't even say anything useful. Like, if that's what you're thinking, well, you're not really, you're playing your A game, right? You're sitting back and criticizing. So after all this time, I was like, right, well, put your money where your mouth is. You went and did this fancy pants MBA. You got your certificate. You waved, you chameleoned yourself into the business world for 4 years. You networked your butt off. You ran yourself to the ground. You burnt yourself out running around Melbourne, being Miss Party Girl and, like meeting all the people with all the leads to all the startups to all the fun. And so you did all of that. And now you're sitting in Bali and you're like, well, come on. Do it. Do a company, see what happens. What's the worst that can happen? So I literally had to go with that mindset. Like, maybe people won't quite resonate yet with this learning designer idea, and maybe they're not ready to pay for us to do that. But hey, I'm going to give it a go because I'm pretty sure we're going to need it. And we did pay off. So and then. And
so of all of those hurdles that you came across, you mentioned imposter syndrome, right? What were some of the others, or outside of that, what was the toughest one that you had to face or are facing, and what did you do about that?
I think, to be perfectly honest, I did a typical Bianca thing, and anyone who knows me, so I thought I'd do everything at once. So I decided not only to start my business, but also to embark on a pretty intense personal journey of self-discovery, as you would call it. So I was pretty fed up with my life in every area. So, love life, home life, everything. I was pretty fed up with all of it. And of course, Mama Bali brought me here because you don't choose Bali, Bali chooses you. So Mama Bali grabbed me and threw me into the middle of Ubud at the same time as she was, she, creator, whatever, was giving me this business idea and said, well, you're going to do some healing as well. So go do some healing and then create the business as well. So trying to do those two at once was and still is in some ways my biggest challenge, because anyone who's been down a very deep personal path will know that it's a rough ride. It's not for the faint-hearted. When you have to recalibrate, or when you're going through the process of rewiring your subconscious and you're understanding why things in your external world are the way they are because of your internal world, and you're starting to realize that there is literally no one to blame but yourself for everything in your life, and you have to take that on the chin and then start refixing it. At the same time, you're trying to launch something into the world. So for me, those two things came very much at the same time. So there was a lot of doubt about whether I was doing the right thing, and whether I should just pause one or the other, right? Because there were days where, you're having some kind of emotional journey, not to mention just being a general woman is an emotional journey, but there were days where you were having an extra emotional journey, or the moon or this was going on. And, the last thing you want to do is get on a call and talk business and try and put that game face on. You just thank God I'm a chameleon and I can flip my kind of persona quite quickly. But there were many days where it was very, very hard work, and especially when you're in the beginning, because everyone knows when you're at the beginning, you don't have a beautiful team around you to do all those things that you don't like doing. So you're doing all of the things. You're in the trenches, you're in the projects, you're in the pits, you're making thousands of decisions again on a daily basis whilst trying to deal with your own personal shit. So for me, I did it at the same time, which was probably not recommended for most. I'd suggest go do your personal work for a bit and then really think about the business, because it needs a lot of you. But I'm being really, really grateful to all the beautiful people that have come into my life around this time, around these last few years, and I couldn't have done it without them. So, and beautiful supportive family around the business, and I've had angels come in too. So it's been hard, but I've got a whole range of angels that float around with me all the time, helping me to keep both things going.
Two things come up. One is, what is holding you back now? That's one.
Ooh.
The second one, right? I'm going to give you time with that one.
I told you needed to make me cry on Thursday.
No,
maybe that's the question.
It's not about that.
I'm not going to cry.
It's not about that.
What is holding me back?
The second one is like when you were getting burnt out.
Yeah.
Right? So were you doing this in a male way of doing it? And if so, what would be, if you could do it again, what would be a more feminine way to do what you do now? Because I think that part of this trap is I've got to be like a guy, right?
Yeah,
I've got to meet the contacts, I've got to do it. Yeah. Whereas the feminine, as I understand it, is so much greater than that, right?
Absolutely.
If it's a bit like this analogy is coming in, really simple one, like a plant. Mm-hmm. If you put it in fertile soil, with all the conditions it needs, that plant will flourish.
Exactly.
Whereas if you put it in a hardened environment where it hasn't got the things that it needs, it can struggle. But then one step worse, or maybe divorced from that, is that if you're trying to put yourself in a different pot, it doesn't fit.
Oh, totally. All of those things. And that actually should have been one of the things I said. So I could talk for hours on the struggle of being a woman who is discovering her femininity for the first time in a real way, but living in a businessman's world. And I'm just going to say businessman's world, because the business system and the structures that we have created are very masculine in their nature. And I daily struggle with how to operate, because again, back to your point very, very early, I think even in my intro about women and running, I wanted to run my company differently. I wanted to run it with heart. I wanted to run it with soul. I didn't want to run it like a consultancy that I had worked in. I didn't want to feel like that. I didn't want my employees to feel like that. I didn't ever want them to feel anywhere near what I felt when I was in that real masculine environment. But at the same time, there's the bottom line, and there's all those business things that we need to consider, because they're real things that matter. Making sure we don't blow out project budgets is important. Otherwise, we don't exist anymore, right? So the tussle, and I'm still dealing with it every day. But one of the things that started to really play a part, and this was probably, it took me maybe 18 months, and I started to realize that my intuition and my feminine intuition was the key. If I could tap into that, I didn't need to do so much analytical thinking and strategizing and this and that, because if I believe in my connection to myself, to my intuition, to source, whatever you want to call it, and I believe in serendipity and synchronicity, then I don't need to think so much all the time, and I can give this thing a bloody break, right? I can just maybe go with the flow a little bit. So we actually have something at Opida called Flow Fridays, because I said to everybody, right, on Fridays, you know, we're not having any meetings, no meetings Fridays. So everybody can wake up and go with their own flow. If you feel like working at 3 in the morning when you wake up, fine, work at 3 in the morning. If you don't want to work until, you know, midday, I don't care. You're remote. I just do the job. It's Flow Fridays. Nobody's in a meeting on a Friday, because I also want that space, because I want to be able to wake up and just feel into whatever my intuition says, because a couple of times I really tested it and I was like, right, I could do this to-do list, or I could tap into my intuition now and do what feels right in the next thing. Like when I open my laptop, I could think about what is it I want to do now. And every single time I did that, and I didn't just follow the list, I realized that if I'd followed the list, I would have burnt time on things that weren't needed to be done. And I was like, yes, go intuition me, yes. So when you do that enough times, you remind yourself that you do already have the answers. And that's the part of the masculine business world that is not spoken about. We're not taught to trust our gut. We're taught to analyze. And analyzing is awesome, yes, but it only goes so far. And for women, we don't need to analyze as much. I make decisions like this when I'm tuned in. I don't have to think too much. I know what I like, what I don't like, and I say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, when I'm tuned in. If I'm up in my head, I can be debating and agonizing and spinning energy on stuff that really doesn't work. So that was a huge barrier to really trust, because I'd been taught so much not to trust myself. That's what the system does. It doesn't teach us to trust ourselves, men and women, by the way, but especially women. We're not taught to trust that we already have a lot of the answers, and we are where we are, exactly where we are at every particular moment. We are here right now because we're supposed to be, right? That is it. And all you've got to do is the next thing, the next decision. So that was the most powerful thing to kind of integrate. It's all well and good to hear that in a book, but to integrate it was the next step. And to be honest, I think it's only been in the last few months where I've actually felt that that's been embodied now with the company as well, and that people are understanding that about me as the leader. So that's a long answer.
Yeah,
did it answer the, what was the question?
Yeah, it did. You know, like again, I don't ask the questions, right? The questions come in, and we just go. I trust the source of the questions, right?
That's why there was no plan.
Yeah, it's funny before.
So I was like, is there a plan?
It was funny. So earlier on, Bianca asked me the question that a lot of people who sit next to me have, right? Which is like, you know, so what do we do? Like, is there any plan? What's the plan? And I say, there is no plan.
All right.
And they're like, huh? What do you mean there's no plan? It's like, there's no plan. I know where we start.
Yep.
And I know that we'll finish eventually. But what happens in between is about listening for what comes up, and I call it active listening. So the 3 types of listening. First type is listening to interrupt. We all do this, right? Let's be honest, we all do it. Like, yeah, but I think, right? Listening to interrupt. Number 2 is a subtle version of that is feigning listening. It's like, yeah. But what I think, right?
Yeah.
Just the same thing.
Just preparing,
right? The third one is like listening actively or with curiosity. And here we're listening to what is being said and what is not being said.
Very clever.
And then with this, we're also tuning into everything else that's creative collectively here. So this is where the questions come from. So now the other question I gave you a little bit of time on was, you know, what is holding you back now, if there is anything?
Oh, I think there's always something. Is my mic still on? Yeah, it is. Yeah, okay. Yeah. I think recently I've been dealing with a bit of anger, actually, and frustration that is not productive. It's not a good frequency energy. So frustration at the world, frustration at the situation, frustration at the sector, the system, all the things, right? It's kind of been accumulating, especially this year. I've been feeling a lot of that. So I've been kind of working through how do I turn that into inspiration, not frustration. It's one of my life lessons I've been told that I need to kind of manage is this, I like things to go fast. So learning to slow down and learning to appreciate that there is a plan in everything, and this is just where we are right now, and it's not going to last forever. And to keep that trust that I just spoke about integrating into my life, to keep that present when I'm in that kind of fear frequency. So that's probably one of the challenges right now. And I think that also as an entrepreneur, there's also always a challenge of like, am I doing the right thing in the right way? Or am I doing the wrong thing in the right way? And that question sometimes comes up, quite often about, is this actually, are we really making an impact? Am I is this really where I can be the best use of me? And that's, even though I'm very aligned as an educator, I know that's why I was put here, to communicate, to educate, to empower. That's not a question, but it's about the activity. So I still have questions about, is this where I should be? So those two things are probably the ones playing in the space today. If you're asking me that question on the spot, that's what's coming up, is trying to turn that frustration and anger into something productive.
Got it.
And making sure I'm still doing the right thing in the right way, not the wrong thing in the right way.
It's interesting because, thank you, darling. It's interesting because, you were saying before that when you're in that feminine, that source energy, you're not in your head.
No, not as much. No,
right?
Definitely.
And perhaps that's something there. Because, how do you, so maybe there's some women or guys looking now saying, flow state, that sounds good. I can relate to it, because the times where I have followed my intuition, things have magically or happened like this. And the times that I haven't, different things are happening, right?
Yeah.
So there's two questions. So one question is, how do you, Bianca, return to that flow state if you're out of balance? That's the first.
Yeah. Well, obviously, well, not obviously, but I do meditate as much as I can force myself to do. There was a stage where it was becoming a very part of my day, and then sometimes it slips away, and I just have to appreciate that it's slipping away for a bit. But yeah, definitely coming back to that quiet place, going back introverted. I also spent a long time thinking I was an extrovert and playing an extroverted role. Like I said, I'm a chameleon. I can walk into any room and play any role that room needs me to play, right? So when you realize that as a young kid, that you are the person that I was the girl everyone was friends with in every friendship group, and I mediated between the groups. Like, that was me. I'm the one who walks into any situation and kind of just maneuver myself to whatever, right? So when you play that role, you also then I basically played up into an extrovert for a long time, because I thought that was the role that I needed to play to get where I needed to be, because all of the successful people that were modeled to us really are extroverted. And so you just, that's how I have to be. I have to be the life of the party. I have to turn up and do all of those things. I have to be there. FOMO was huge, fear of missing out. Like, I can't not go to that event, because what if this happens, and what if that happens, and what if I don't meet the right person? And all of that FOMO shit was playing in my mind for so long that I just burnt out trying to be an extrovert. So to answer to your question, now I appreciate I'm actually really an introvert. Like, I can do people. I love people. I love this, event. But I might not talk to somebody tomorrow until like lunchtime now, right? Because, we've just had all of this excitement. So my body's all like, yeah. And then it needs to come down, and it needs to recover and go back into itself, and then show back up in the world. So that's one of the things I've had to learn, is that I need a lot more quiet time, a lot more than I ever thought I needed. And that's been a big part of, being able to keep showing up for the team. So I get stressed when I haven't had that quiet time and I can't take that space, and when I feel that there's too much going on. I also thought that I was supposed to be really good at multitasking, and it's not good for anybody. Even if you can do it, it's not good for your system. It's not good for your nerves. anyone who says that they are and they can and they think they're fine, you will burn out because the brain is not meant to do that. Especially for long periods of time on a computer with dinging and shouting and it's just. So I try to avoid those two traps, which was doing too much out here and playing up to the role of multitasker.
Love it. So one more question and we go to the audience. So if you've got any questions in the audience, think about them. Think about that question. So this question, I think is important for people to understand, because right now they might be thinking, okay, learning designer, got it. Education system is broken,
yes.
Got it. Okay, but they might be thinking, like it's just about the education system, but it's so not. The application of what you do is so incredibly vast that I don't actually understand it, right? I know it goes from education to entrepreneurship or anything that requires online education, whether it's intra-company, inter-company. So give us an idea of how wide this learning designer thing can actually go.
Cool. I think it's important just to point out that every organization is a learning organization, right? If that's not your mentality as a leader, as a management team, or whoever you are as an entrepreneur, then you're going to have a big problem, right? Every human, every being, everybody out here who wants to participate in this world is a learner. So there doesn't need to be this divide anymore. We all need to be able to keep up and upskill, and we know how quickly life has changed for each generation, and this isn't about the next step. This is right here, right now. Young people today are going to have 15 careers, but we've known this for a very long time. I mean, when I graduated at 22, I remember at the graduation speech of, the heads of the school, they gave this speech about, a child born today and all the things that would be different for that child, and I remember crying, because it was like, yeah, wow, like this, I'm only 22 and that kid's 20 and, 22 years apart, but there's going to be a huge difference in the way that we show up in the world. So we've known this for a very long time. It's not new knowledge. So we're all learners. What we've forgotten and what unfortunately the technology and the way that society has been going over the last 10 years has made us so goddamn distracted and so entertained. We're so entertained that we've gone numb. We've forgotten what it's like to learn because we're so used to being passive and being entertained, right? We've been shoved, everything's been given to us in these beautiful entertainment packages and kept us all happy, try to keep us numb actually. And the reality is, when you learn something, it is actually quite difficult. It should be a little bit difficult. It shouldn't be easy. It shouldn't be fast. It shouldn't be entertaining. It should be quick. It shouldn't be this. Yes, there is a whole range of things that should be easy in your learning journey, like logging onto the system should be easy, right? Pressing play on the video should be easy. But the learning part should not be easy. If it's too easy, you haven't learnt a goddamn thing, right? So we as everybody in society, regardless of wherever role you are, who are, we have to remember that learning is a little bit hard and we have to put our big girl pants on or our big boy pants on and get in there and have a go. Because learning a new skill is going to feel uncomfortable because you have to shed something. You have to get rid of something old to replace the new. That's the point. So that's one thing that as a learning designer we have a role to do, is we have a role not to just entertain the learner. We have to take them on this journey. We have to make them retrieve information. We have to build in feedback loops. We have to make sure they are taking autonomy and taking responsibility for that experience and that learning. So that's our role as learning designers. If we just create fun, fancy videos that are passive, then we're not doing our job either. And the second thing is that, what was the second thing? Hang on, you asked me about institutions. So, sorry, I momentarily lost my train of thought. Everybody is an educator and everybody is who runs a company is a learning institution. And that has to be adopted as a mindset and as part of your core values. Because if you haven't been thinking about how to retain your staff, how to keep them upskilled, how to encourage risk, encourage failure, encourage collaboration, encourage that self-driven stuff. Now, in saying that, the system has actually spent the entire time beating that out of everybody. So just because you encourage it doesn't mean it's going to happen. So there's a whole range, that's a whole other half an hour. But creating a learning organisation is also creating an organisation of psychological safety. If that's all you do as a leader, then you are winning. Create psychological safety for your team to be able to come into an organisation and feel safe to ask questions, to learn from one another, and to say that they don't know something. If that's all you do, you're already beaten most companies, right? The whole issue about entrepreneurship and creativity, that's a whole other ballgame, because that's about what we've done to us as institutionalised students. If anyone who's been through the system and been to school and university and whatever, you're institutionalised, whether you like it or not, and you have to deprogram that. But what we can do as organisations is we can create that psychological safety, and that comes in lots of forms. And learning, learning programs and how we do that is another way.
I can go down the rabbit hole there, honey. But I just want to see, does anyone here have any questions? Just feel free just to raise your hand. Remember, no question's silly. Every question's got merit, and most of the time it's because someone's thinking it. So I think, do we have a question? Yeah. Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah. Bianca, yes. Number one, I have to...
Oh.
Was it working? Yes.
For the feedback.
Okay. First of all, I want to say thank you. I think it's probably one of the best talks I have heard here with Robert.
Lovely.
It is absolutely up my alley.
Nice to hear.
Okay. I want to talk to you some other time. I believe, or I understand, that Robert is your coach.
Yeah, we're going to start working together.
And yeah. I think that's for a really great discussion. I have one question for you. Have you ever heard of Charlotte Iserby?
No, sorry, I haven't.
Well, so when you talk about systems, I'm going to forward you that video. It's about 2.5 hours, but you have to go from start to finish, and you will understand how the educational system has been established in the United States on a Freudian concept.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and so therefore, on what you say, the male-female side, I think the male part has to understand that we've actually been probably females many times before, but in this time we've just been controlled by a system. And the system has screwed up everything the last 30, 40 years, if not before. I think we can be very fortunate that the last 70 years we have been in the Western world, so been protected from wars and what have you. And at the moment, we have to really address every corner of the society from a new human value.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more.
If the time allows in the coming weeks, I would love to see if we can meet up and talk, but I will forward through an email to you the extra information. But it's absolutely brilliant, and I'm not being disrespectful to you, Robert. I met you about 4 years ago, and I said to you, Robert, the day will come where I feel we can work together, and I think that I'm not joking. This is probably one of the most refreshing talks I have heard for a very long time on a global basis. But here in Bali, absolutely number one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Guido, thank you so much, mate. And so when we were doing this, there were 5 people that I reached out to. Guido was one of them, because I felt like this would be right up your alley. That's what I felt, right? Another one was Arthur Kamadzi, who you're going to meet tomorrow, and then there were three others, and one is Kevin Lerber, who did one about education and capitalism. So capitalism being a new form of education. Another great human being, and 2 others, right? And it's beautiful to hear that, right? Because this is what this is really about, right? I mean, tomorrow, 7 a.m. on Clubhouse is Richard Harrington, and he was retired at 24, South African. Is an entrepreneur, philanthropist, and so on. And Freedom Day, he's starting Freedom Day, it's called, and it's Freedom Day. There'll be one for 12 different countries, so all over the world. And 7 a.m. Clubhouse tomorrow. If you're around, come and check it out. The SpeakuP Monday group there. SpeakuP Monday Club, I think it's called. And so we're going to dive deep into that story.
Nice.
But he's another guy who wants to educate. He wants to set people free. And the video that Guido is talking about, I've seen it. Because he forwarded it to me 2.5 hours, and I listened to all of it. And like, there's part of us, you know, when you hear something and you know there's part of you which is like you knew it all along, but maybe you didn't want to see it, or maybe you really didn't want to see it, right? Because it can be uncomfortable.
Oh, it's totally.
It can be uncomfortable.
Learning's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And you have to reprogram something, and you have to think, oh God, I saw it that way for so long, and now I see it this way. Shit, I have to rethink everything. But then part of that is also forgiveness for not knowing. Right, you have to forgive yourself. I mean, I've had to do a lot of grieving for what I didn't know, and then forgiveness of myself for acting in a certain way because I didn't know and I couldn't see. And that's part of that spiritual journey, I guess, that we all go on at one point in our life. And that's why I was doing that simultaneously while building this this business inside the matrix, basically. But sitting in Bali on my computer, but it's still inside the matrix. And I think I just want to pick up on the systems thing too, and just to make sure. I mean, the system has not been good for either gender. Right, so it's done a lot of damage to both, and this isn't. I'm still on the fence about these sort of being called a woman entrepreneur, because I'm just an entrepreneur. But I also see the value in having a discussion about what it's like to be in a feminine energy, in a feminine body, in this time, in this place. And I think that's a worthy conversation to have, because it has its own merits. But we've all been damaged by the killing of creativity, the killing of spirit, the killing of connection to self that the system has been set up to do by, I'm sure, what your video will outlines very clearly. And that is the part, like you just said, when I was sitting in that system and I was playing my part, I felt like a pawn in a really bad game. And I was like, I don't want to be a pawn in this bullshit game. I mean, I was getting sent out to Indigenous communities in Australia, in Northern Australia, some of the most underprivileged, dysfunctional societies within Australia. And that's not a criticism to them, by the way. This is just fact. And I was being sent out there with no cultural training, no support, mentoring, basically just to flounder, because it was a bums on seat kind of idea. And I was supposed to be going out there as a pawn for the government to tell them what the government wanted them to do. I was being used in a system, and I was like, this is so wrong. It looks like I'm doing literacy coaching, but what I'm actually doing is just putting a message down from the top. And I can see that message is such bullshit, and it's not what these people need, and it's not what anybody needs as a human, and it's toxic, and it's not going to go anywhere. And I was like, that's why it was this like, I don't want to play anymore. Like, I don't want to be your pawn. And then how do I understand the game I was playing so that I make sure I never play it again, and I can maybe affect some change from the outside? And that was the journey of the MBA and all the other random jobs I did along the way, and all the kind of experiences that I threw at myself. It was to basically make sure I was like clear on where I didn't want to play and how I wasn't going to be part of that problem. But then, of course, the more you go down this path, you realize that there's lots and lots of layers of it. So I'm still constantly having to recheck myself. Or should I said, like, one of my challenges right now is, am I still doing the right thing in the right way? Because do I know enough? Is there more stuff I should know that would change what I do on a daily basis? And keeping that inquiry open, and that's what we as humans need to do if we want to survive, is we need to keep asking ourselves. We need to know how to unlearn. That is one of the best. Right now, if you just say to me, what is the top skill that I want a young person to learn, is how to unlearn, right? They have to know how to unlearn. If you don't know how to unlearn, then you're going to have a very hard life, right? Because you're going to go down a path and you're never going to move from it. And it's going to cause all this resistance. You're not going to be the boat sailing in the wind, going with the wind, because if you can't unlearn and if you can't have the humility to go back deep and go, hang on a minute, What I thought I know was true was not true anymore. Shit. Okay, forgive myself for those actions at that moment. I'm going to move forward with this new knowledge. If you can't do that, it's going to be very, very hard for you to live in a peaceful way. You can live, sure, you'll be fine, but whether you want peace or harmony or love in your life, I don't know. So I really do believe learning how to unlearn is critical. And then learning how to learn again, because we've all forgotten how to do that because we're so distracted.
You know, yeah, you got something to add? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what you're talking, it makes 100% sense. There is no question about it. It is a fact. So we have to unlearn. We're peeling an onion every day.
Yeah.
And every day, as you said, Robert, before, if you're open, you're coming from here, because this is actually your biggest or the strongest GPS. It's from the heart. The biggest journey or the longest journey is actually from
Through the head,
to
yeah.
the heart.
Yeah.
Okay? And most people are not coming from the heart. It's totally been cut off.
Yeah, because we're taught to ignore the heart.
Exactly.
And we're taught that it doesn't...
One of my best friends, he's a fantastic yoga teacher. He teaches in Byron Bay. He literally always said, reach from the heart.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yep, we've got a long way to go. But there's lots of people out there really kind of coming to that place. I think of all the things that I'm angry about the last 18 months, one of the things I'm grateful for is that it has definitely made a lot of people go inward and really do a bit of that work, that personal work that's needed, because nothing out here will change if we all don't change in here, and that's just the law of the universe. So, you know, there's been a lot of terrible stories come out of the last 18 months, but I think one of the good ones is that lots of people have been put in that situation where they've had to do that inner work and to make some changes to themselves.
Love it, girl. Love it. Another question?
Hi.
With the new system hopefully coming into play, do you think we have to be careful to not become a us and them? Because it needs to be inclusive, doesn't it? And the system has been around for so long and is so hard and fast. So how do you think we can go about being inclusive and having a smooth transition, if you do agree with that?
When you say new system, what are you exactly referring to? Are you talking about the new ways that people are starting to live their lives and build community, and are you talking about more homeschooling as opposed to system schooling, or?
Yeah, like just a new way of learning, because we it seems like we haven't got a great system at the moment. Yeah,
okay. So I guess, well, maybe this is where I dropped the decentralization sort of, concept, because I think that's what's really exciting at the moment, is that because we have these beautiful tools on the internet now and they've been refined. So we've been, like I said, online learning is not new, but so all these beautiful tech companies have been working their little butts off to create these systems, and edtech, #edtech. Now we have a situation where they're affordable to the entrepreneur or the what I call the armchair experts, right? So the Robs of the world, He's not a professor of Harvard, are you, Rob? But you could call yourself one, and it wouldn't matter, because I'm sure we'd love to see you be called Professor Rob from Harvard. So basically, armchair experts, I call them, they are on the rise, and that is beautiful, right? Because what that says is that there is always, everybody's a teacher. You know something more than somebody else does, or you've been through something, you have something to teach or to guide or to mentor. And so when we decentralize education, which is what's happening with these beautiful tools that are available, is we get an opportunity for people to have variety and make choices, and to have autonomy and to have experiences that they never would have had before. So instead of a young person now sitting in high school, I think this still happens in lots of private schools, but there would be many schools now where it's very much would be accepted to be thinking, I'm not going to go to university. Right? Whereas it was like, when I was even at school, like 20 years ago, if I said I wasn't going to uni, everyone would have fallen over backwards, right? Because I was one of the smart kids who was supposed to go to uni. That's what you do. Now, we now have an option that students are saying, you know what, I'm going to go be an intern for a bit. I'm going to go learn this, and I'm going to pick up this course, and I'm going to go to Udemy, and I'm going to learn this, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to go and watch Daniel's Excel spreadsheet videos. They're in German, so I can't watch them, but apparently they're really good. I'm going to learn my skills on my own. I'm going to da-da-da-da, right? And then I'm going to figure out what I want to do, and then I'll do formal education if it works for me. And so that's what's really beautiful about the system right now, is that we are seeing students starting to walk with their feet and speak with their feet. If you think of it in a business context, students are generally fairly unsophisticated investors, right? What we would label them as if we're talking about products. They're an unsophisticated investor because they're a captured market that is basically brainwashed into saying yes to the undergrad degree. Now, finally, there's some intervention, and we're getting that question mark. I might not have to go and give this university $50,000 of my money to then deem me appropriate to do some job that is unknown. And we are seeing some of the big companies do their own internal education. So that's what's really exciting, and that's why Opida is starting to branch out into the entrepreneurial space. We're launching a sister brand very soon to try and work with people. Yay! Yes. Sister brand. I'm not ready to say it publicly yet, but I will soon. A sister brand, because we really want to, at the same time as helping organisations do a better job, because most of our clients are institutions and organisations, universities, we want to help entrepreneurs who have got some really amazing stuff to say and can really change people's lives to get their wisdom out and get it out in a way that is going to teach, not just be passive, right? So it's about creating courses that last, stand the test of time, and are grounded in pedagogy. And again, grounded in pedagogy.
What the hell is that?
Pedagogy is like, well, okay, so learners learn like this. We know there's a whole lot of rhetoric out there about, everyone's got a unique learning style and all this stuff. Now, learning styles have been poo-pooed years ago. We have a preference of how we like to receive material, but we all fundamentally learn pretty much the same way, right? There are fundamental things about how the human brain will take information and apply it, retrieve it, spit it back out, or do it somewhere, right? And integrate it, right? The fundamental human things. And so what pedagogy is about is just making sure you're accounting for all that.
Okay.
So in the entrepreneurial space, we have a lot of people who have a lot of lovely things to say, but once again, they're a bit like the academic. They might be a really amazing Qigong teacher or whatever, but they have never had to explain what they do to somebody else. And so that's the challenge of that space, because it's been very crowded with a lot of noise of, a lot of just talking and teaching, looking like it's teaching. But if we want to affect change, we know we have to design experiences and maybe programs as such and kind of take them on that journey. So what I'm excited about is this ability to come up and rise up and be your own kind of educator. And every entrepreneur who's thinking about doing an online course, I would really encourage you to see yourself as part of the education system. So look at the system, do your research, have a look at the map, what's going on in the space. There's some beautiful resources that you're out there that helps you understand, because you are part of that system now. And they're starting to take notice of you. You're actually getting on slideshows in these academic forums, the entrepreneurs, because they're going, shit, these are competition now. These people that can come up with these beautiful courses online, and they can come and kick my butt on my production value, and they're getting more students than we can get in our program that we've been selling under our fancy brand for a very long time. So you guys are now starting to rise up and then taking notice. And so this is where the ownership now has to come in for, okay, well, if I'm going to build an online course, I'm going to own that I'm an educator. And that means I need to own that I need to upskill as an educator. And that's what I'm excited to help entrepreneurs do, is own the fact that they're now educators. And they're part of this beautiful change.
I love that, because earlier on, I think I mentioned that this is so vast for me that I haven't quite got my head around it, and just through what you just shared now, I kind of get it a lot more, right? And it literally is everyone, as you mentioned before. Yeah. We're all learners, right? So this is applicable to everyone.
Absolutely.
You know?
I bet you've got a couple of online courses you're enrolled in at the moment, and somewhere on some login to something. You know, we're all learners.
Yeah, and there's courses I remember, which I've paid for, some I've paid for, but I haven't finished them.
Yep, exactly. We all do it. I do it.
I'm like, holy shit, finish that one. It's like, yeah, okay, maybe I should.
Well, if you should, you should. If you don't want to, if you should, you would be doing it.
No, you're right. And look, on that note, actually, so maybe if you give us just a little example of how a learning designer would approach it. You alluded to it earlier on with these feedback loops.
Yeah.
But if you could go into a little bit more detail so somebody here can get a greater understanding of why a learning designer can design something which won't have a 3% completion rate, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's two things. One is the synchronous and the asynchronous engagement, right? So there's a delivery model and a development model. And I'm probably using a bit of terminology, but I'll try not to as much. Basically, humans need to be accountable. We like being accountable. We're not some of us are more self-motivated than others, and depending on, I guess, where we are and what we need that thing for. So I imagine those courses were just kind of interesting for you. They weren't imperative for you, right? Yeah. So if they're not imperative for you, it's going to be very difficult for you to pick them up at the end of a long day, right? Yeah. Unless you have a community around you that's helping you to keep staying on track, which is what we mean by the delivery model. So with entrepreneurs, we speak about delivery and the development, and with anyone actually. And it's about, well, how are you going to engage? How are they going to feel you? How are you going to be in the chorus? How are you going to show up for them so that they feel a connection? Because like we buy from people, we learn from people. We don't learn from machines, right? Machines will never take the job of teaching away from us because it's not in our nature. We learn from humans. We learn from connection. We learn from an ability of a human to read our body language and take it to the next step and be intuitive and do active listening and all those wonderful things. So every online course that wants to succeed, and success measure, we can have a debate about what that is, but needs to have some kind of synchronous engagement opportunity. So a live feedback. They need to have something where they come in and speak to a human, whether that be on a chat or whether it be in a live webinar, or they have some kind of engagement model. The success rates when you do that are so much higher than if you don't. So the statistic that I shock people with, the one that you opened with, is because that's for the self-paced, fully online, no engagement with a human model. That's why they're so low. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're sitting there and you're like, I've got all this wisdom and I just want to put it all out into a course, well, you can do that, absolutely. But if you don't create a model around it where either community are engaging with one another and learning from each other and are being checkpoint, and that there's some kind of milestones, or if there's some kind of active part, then you're probably going to get a 4 or 5% completion rate, right? Unless you are like absolutely the god of one wisdom. I don't know. If you're the only person ever to teach one thing, maybe you'll get a better result. Or you have a lot of friends that really like you. But generally, if you're going to go out to the population, that's probably what you're going to get. So the first thing we do is we look at, well, what is a sustainable model for you and your business, right? For you to be delivering. So how much time will you give? Oh, bug.
Sorry.
No, sorry. Got a barley. Yeah.
A barley bug.
The barley bug. How much time do you want to give? And then what we do is we go, well, thanks.
got him on the third time. Sorry about that, guys.
Such a barley thing to do.
I didn't kill it. I never killed it, right?
A second. It's not dead.
It's not dead. It's over there, right? In the garden.
We're still going to heaven.
Hanging out with friends.
Right. The second thing we do is that we have to design for the eye roll, right? So in a classroom, as an educator, as a facilitator, as anyone, whatever label you want to call yourself, you're reading the room, you're reading energy. We know 80% of our communication is in body language, right? We read energy, we read the room. Now online, what do? We don't know. They could have screaming kids, they could be on the bus, they could be anywhere. You have no idea where this person is, right? And so you have to plan for that. If you're like, right, well, if they're on any of these circumstances, how do I create markers or feedback loops or moments where we can understand if they're still with us, right? How can I capture their attention? How can I keep them moving? right? Because I'm not in the room to look at them. I can't see when they've gone, like this. So that's what learning designers do. We look at how do we create milestones and markers. Then we look at how do we make sure that the learning outcome, well, there even is one. So we have a term called constructive alignment, which is when an educator says, okay, I want to teach this, and they go, cool, that's a great thing to teach, tick box for you. And then they go off and they start building out content, they start typing out PDFs and whatever, and then they throw them all up online, and then they go, oh shit, we should do the assessment task, and they make some assessment tasks, and they put it through the little academic board and comes back. And then the student gets to the assessment and nothing that they had learnt helps them do the assessment. So they have to go and relearn a whole bunch of shit to do the assessment. Now that's when something is not constructively aligned. So this is critical even for entrepreneurs. They don't need to use that lingo, and I would never use it with them. But if you have to understand why you're doing what you're doing, what you want them to come out with. If you understand what you want them to come out with, then you design back. So we do call it backward design. Design back from what, how can you see what is success of somebody doing your course, right? Ask that question first, then you design the content back. And if there's anything that you're saying inside of that course or doing inside that course that doesn't align with that end outcome, then shouldn't be in there. It's just superfluous. Superfluous?
Superfluous. It's a beautiful word. Superfluous
information, right? So as an entrepreneur, working in that space to try and help people understand that, a learning designer helps cut all that crap as well. We help make sure it's aligned. We help make sure that there is activities to retrieve and that the learner has done something active. As well as just sat and taken in information passively. Because if we just sit passively, we're just being entertained, right? So we have to design that. So there's some practical things learning designers do.
Love that. So now you know why I'm excited about learning designers, right? Because all these things we spoke briefly about, but what I grasped was that, for example, I've done a few online courses that I've created, and I think they're great, right? There's a video in there,
amazing.
and they're blah, 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 blah. But then I realized that all of the things pretty much that you're saying, like if there's like a checklist of 10, I've got like 3.
Nice.
3 done really well.
3 done really well.
But 3, right? So there's probably, I might be in the 3%, maybe 4% completion rate because friends were doing it. I don't know. But again, right? But it's a very valid thing, to realize that, hey, if we want to, we're all learners. And if we really want to, learn in an effective way, especially in teams, whether it's education or any multiple levels of multifaceted layers of business, then we really do need to engage learning designers, to make this happen in the best way possible. But how can people contact you, right? So if people are saying, I love what she's saying, I love who she is, she seems like she's having a go.
Just having a go.
She's having a go.
An Aussie battler.
Aussie battler, right? From Adelaide, Aussie battler, right? How do they get in touch with you?
So the best way is through Opida, so www.opida.co. So we're .co, OPPIDA.co, and LinkedIn. So you can find me, Bianca Raby. I think I'm the only one. I think there is one other Bianca Raby somewhere in America, but you'll find me pretty quickly on LinkedIn. That's my main source of social media. So if you want to connect, LinkedIn's the best way.
Yeah, so she's not. What she's trying to tell you there, very subtly, is that she gave up Instagram
and
she gave up Facebook because she thought they were crock, and and now so LinkedIn,
the
website.
Yep, and you can. There's heaps of ways to communicate it to us through the website, so you won't get lost. And we have a YouTube channel as well, which has got some really amazing videos on there. There's actually a course called Online Course Launch Strategy for Entrepreneurs, a free YouTube course. It's 8 modules, 2-3 minutes each, and I basically just step through the thinking that I would go through as a consultant if you sat in front of me and said, I want to build a course. It's basically my first 8 steps I would take you through. The whole idea is if you do that by yourself and come to me and say, I still want to build a course, we can get on with it quickly. Right? So that's up there as well, and that has a lot of templates in it as well, and just asks for you to ask the right questions. Because just going back to the entrepreneur thing, the thing about the decentralization of education is that we run the risk of a lot of waste also in that system that doesn't work, and people that are kind of spending money, and I hate waste, right? So I just want people to understand that if you're going to play the game and you want to be building online courses and you want to be in that space, here's some fundamentals, get it right, be a leader, be successful. Otherwise, don't do it. Don't bother. Right? There's enough noise out there. We don't need any more noise. We don't need any more people just talking at people on screen. We need lots of more of the learning and the changing of lives. So that's kind of our mission, is to sort of help people really understand if it's part of if it is something they should be doing. And back to your point about your course, I will put a caveat on all those statistics that I love Sprout. Sometimes a really good facilitator might get away with it. Whoa. Just because you're engaging.
Come on!
Right? So if you're really engaging on camera like you are, you might get away with it. So your stats sort of like you're the outlier, right?
Yeah.
Right? But most of us, especially when we're learning to be on camera for the first time, if that's something you're doing, we have to work harder to keep people there. So yeah, there are always exceptions to the rule. There's lots of really charismatic entrepreneurs that kind of seem to go against all rules that I would ever imagine about how people would actually accept their content. But it's because they have that really amazing first personality that just kind of shines through. So yeah, if you're not in that category, then you need to really work hard at making it an engaging learning experience from the get-go.
Got it. And look, so final question from me. So it keeps coming up, and I think it's worthwhile to ask. Mm-hmm. So this entrepreneurism and education. So entrepreneurism and education. So if I bring those two words up together, like what comes up for you? Entrepreneurism and education.
I think, when I talk about the entrepreneur as the market, I'm talking about sort of the solo entrepreneurs that are really trying to build a business around something that they know they're really good at. That maybe, the aspiring digital nomads or all that kind of lingo around like, I love this, I love doing this thing, so I want to make money from doing this thing. And unfortunately, there has been a lot of people in the space who are promising massive returns and set and forget and make money while you sleep and all this kind of bullshit around courses, right? Because in some ways, if you do market like a crazy person, then you can hound people enough to buy your thing. And if you've got a marketing budget, you can probably sell. And I guess, so when I say entrepreneurs in education, I'm talking about like trying to get everybody to share their beautiful, unique gifts with the world in a way that works. Now, it might not be a course. It may just be a really amazing YouTube channel. It may be SpeakuP Mondays, right? You might not be a course designer, we don't know, but you give it a go, right? But as an entrepreneur, you're taught, if you are wanting to start this kind of solo journey of, being maybe you're a healer or you've got some amazing talent, you do have to think about the different income streams that you're going to have as a professional. So that's the kind of market I'm talking about with that space. So those people are getting to the surface and are able to now access these systems and access learners, and people are more, their appetite is more for paying someone like you to teach them stuff, right? The appetite is there, especially in America. They love paying for courses. So Australia's hard work still to get an individual to pay for their own education in that way through a credit card on the internet, but the Americans seem to be fine with it. So they are buying courses left, right, and centre. So they're self-educating because they know that they need to.
Got it. So now, if there are any other questions, we're happy to field them. Otherwise, what we'll do is I'm going to quickly check the time, which I believe I know what it is. Yep, we're good.
Well done.
There you go, Bianca Raby.
2 minutes.
You did good, girl. You did good. And so look, So what we do now? So in probably about a minute and a half's time. So I'll ask you, Bianca Raby, amazing woman. So if there's anything left that maybe you're drawn to say, it might be something you've said already, it might be reinforcing something or something brand new that comes up as a way to kind of close the show. All right, in about a minute and a half. Now, up until then, I'm going to do this, which I don't usually do, but I have to. For this one, I feel compelled to get it right. So there's a guy, right? His name is Arthur Kamazi, and this guy is a phenomena. So I want to get it right. So Arthur Kamazi, this is on Wednesday. So SpeakuP Monday, Wednesday. Now this is like a live stream, so it won't be with a live studio audience. And by the way, if you want to come and join us as a live studio audience on a Monday, we're here at Tropical Nomad. Come at 6, a little bit earlier, and feel free to be part of this community and the studio audience, ask questions and so on. So on Wednesday at 6 p.m., Arthur Kamazi is ranked as the world's number one most influential thought leader in organizational culture for 2021. Best-selling author, founder of the Directive Communication Psychology, gamification methodologies of influence training and leadership development industry through his unique game-based psychological approaches, including 13 books, including number one bestsellers on Amazon. Like he's building this amazing, I don't know what to call it. It's in Ubud. Some of you have been there already, and it's Avalon, right? It's called Avalon, and in Ubud, an amazing building structure that goes back many, many years, has secret passages, and is a gamification hub. That's
where I'm going tomorrow.
That's where you're going tomorrow, right? So that's Arthur Kamazi.
I think I've been there before.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal guy. So he'll be on Wednesday, 6 p.m. And on tomorrow, Tuesday at 7 a.m. is Richard Harrington, I mentioned before, retired at 24, featured in Forbes, South African, amazing, soulful, beautiful man as well. And he's creating something that SpeakuP Monday will have like a special, like powered by SpeakuP Monday, which is called Freedom Day. And Freedom Day will be for 1 month or every month. So that's 12 months from a different country in the world. And it's about freedom. It's about freeing us up as human beings to not only tap into our gifts and talents, but also to express them. So it's called Freedom Day. And it will start, I think, on July the 1st. So there's a few great things coming up. In the meantime, thank you to Tropical Nomad, to Itchy, the crew, the team, always putting us on, making us look and sound good. Thank you so much, brother. Incredible guy, Itchy. If you haven't been here yet, Itchy Yamada, personal plug.
He's
love
the man.
him. He's an amazing guy.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else I want to explain? Probably not. I think that's enough. So, without further ado, I just want to thank you, Bianca Raby, for stepping up to the plate and being the person that I met and the person that I saw very early on, actually, outside of the Australianisms that we keep on joking and laughing about. But you're an amazing person. You're an amazing individual who's doing some incredible things. And I love the honesty that you show us, which is inspiring and motivating by itself. But also your mission, and it wasn't a mission that came out of, they say that we're impacted by inspiration or desperation.
Oh yeah.
And for you, I get, for most people it's desperation, but for you I see it's inspiration. And that in itself is motivating, because a lot of us believe that it's only by, being desperate that we're going to make a move to do something, but you've done it the opposite way. And I don't meet many people like that, actually. So you're in a rare
category.
A rare category, right, for me personally. So look, over to you, darling. If there's anything that you feel compelled or you'd love to share, and now is your time.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, thank you for seeing me. Which is amazing. It's a beautiful gift. Thank you for seeing all of the guests that you do, and doing this kind of work to inspire people, connect people. Like I said at the beginning, met you a couple of months ago, and you were introing me like I was a celebrity on Thursday night, and it was just so sweet. And you do it, and you're doing it so out of the bottom of your heart. It's absolutely with no conditions, and that's a really beautiful thing to feel that unconditional support. And I can only hope I give you the same now that we are connected. But I guess maybe some final words to the people. Oh, and a bug. Yep. Final words would be that we are in a very interesting time on this planet, and everybody who is here chose to be here, believe it or not, to witness what is going on. And I guess if we draw all of it back to the core, is just to trust yourself. And that's what we all need right now, more than anything. And to be really kind to yourself. And that's what I've had to learn, is that, there's a lot of stuff that could get you down, could take you into a different frequency, but to try and stay in that place of trust and love with yourself and then with everyone else around you would be my final words. And if we do all do that, we're going to have a much different life. So
Thank you, darling.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you. Yeah, give us a hug, love. Give us a hug.